Welcome again to another edition of Project Cancer. Today we have Billy Boyle, who will introduce himself in a moment. I've known him for about a dozen years, though not particularly well. He's another entrepreneur in the Cambridge ecosystem. He's been working on the business for about 20 years, but he'll tell us about that himself. So Billy, please introduce yourself and why I'm interviewing you today.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for having me. So I'm originally grew up in Belfast, so native Belfast boy. When I was a teenager, started to get super interested in electronics, technology, those types of things, and ended up in Cambridge studying engineering. So that was about 25 years ago, now in 1997, and kind of loved Cambridge, loved everything about it. It's pretty much realised once I was here that I want to stay here. Had a wonderful time at university, and then stayed on as a researcher afterwards, and got really interested in chemical detection, and I'll talk a little bit later about what we do in chemical detection as it relates to early detection of cancer, but that was a kind of twinkle in the eye at that point. So we founded Owlstone back in 2004, originally focused around detecting toxic gases, nasty chemicals, those types of things, explosives and whatnot. And it was an amazing journey. So again, one of the great things about here was the support that you get in Cambridge. You know, people like yourselves are always willing to give time and help to people trying to start their own businesses. So that was kind of back in 2004. And I was having a wonderful time, stressful time in startup, but a wonderful time. And also in 2004, I met a girl called Kate, and Kate would later become my wife. We quickly fell in love, moved in together, and in 2009, Kate became pregnant. And we were excited and scared, more excited and scared when we found out that it was actually twins. Yeah. We on the day that we found out, we were both actually going traveling in different places. I was going to the US to visit my brother and dad, who were out there on a holiday, and Kate was flying off to Africa because she was working there at the time. So we kind of found out this news and kind of off we went. Processing it in our minds as we were on different planes heading in different directions. Isaac and Oscar were born, very happy, super energetic babies, as all babies are. And then a few years later, in 2012, Kate was diagnosed with what turned out to be stage 4 colon cancer. And up until that point, she had been having tummy troubles for a long time, actually.
She had been having.
Yeah, she had, so many years, and I think it was difficult because she wasn't particularly at risk. So she was young; she was only 34 when she was diagnosed, and it's pretty bad luck to get cancer at that age, particularly colorectal cancer. And I think part of the challenge with things like colorectal cancer is, people often don't feel comfortable talking about, my poo has changed, those types of things. It's not a very easy thing to talk to people about. I think another big challenge is often doctors, if they're not thinking this person's at risk,
yes,
then it's probably not the thing that they're thinking of. If you don't have easily available tests and those types of things, it's kind of easy to see how kid just thought, I have IBS, and then was trying to manage the symptoms over a period of years.
Literally years.
Yeah, it was years. And I remember actually there was one time she said to me, what if it's something serious? And I was like, yeah, you're only 32 or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I often think of that. But as it kind of turned out, when she was traveling back from the US, actually, she'd been on a work trip and she was sick for the entire flight back. So it was an overnight flight. She was sick the entire time. And she messaged me saying, I feel really bad. I'm going to go to the hospital on the way back. And they did the scan, and kind of through the day, it became worse and worse news. And it turned out
CT or something, did they?
Yeah, so they did a CT scan, and I think they saw the tumour present in the colon, but then they also saw tumours in the liver as well. And I think they didn't say to me at that point in time, it is definitely cancer, they said, or our worry is it is cancer. I raced on to the hospital. Childminder came to look after the kids, and she was brought in the surgery that evening. So absolutely wonderful doctor and surgeon.
Addenbrooke's.
At Addenbrooke's. Wonderful surgeon who's like, right, we're going to operate tonight. I went home and didn't know what to do with myself. And then, he phoned 9:30, 10 o'clock that night, said it is cancer. We've removed what we can from the tumour, from the colon. And I went and was there when Kate woke up. And I told her. And then from that point, Kate was incredibly fierce, organised, smart. So she was very much like, right, what are you going to do? Originally she had chemotherapy to try and shrink the tumours that were present in the liver. We looked at different surgical options, so here in the UK, also in the US, and she ended up going, so it was October she was diagnosed. We ended up going to America, MD Anderson, for surgery in March of the following year.
That's Baltimore, isn't it? Is that right?
Texas.
Texas, okay.
And that everything, she was obviously incredibly unlucky to get cancer in the first instance, but we felt after that surgery she had a good response to the chemotherapy, so it reduced the size of the tumours, and the surgery in America went well. So they were able to remove all of the tumours from the liver.
Really?
Because the debate before was, maybe we need to do this in 2 operations, take out some of the tumours, let the liver regenerate, and then go back second time to take out the remainder of the tumours. So that surgery went well. She then had subsequent round of chemotherapy as well, and then was kind of given the all clear in September of that year. And for us it was kind of like, okay, her survival chances had gone from 5% to 50%, and discussions with oncologists and the surgeons, they were saying, well, if it comes back, it'll be in the liver, stuff we can do about that. And then we're doing scans, looking at the tumour markers in the blood, and one of the tumour markers started to increase quite dramatically.
And this was some weeks or months later after this?
It was only about 2 months later.
Coming up towards Christmas now.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a bit of discussions like, what does this mean? They did some imaging, they couldn't find anything. And then they went back, did some more imaging, and it had come back, but it wasn't just in the liver, it was back in the colon, it was in the liver, and it spread, and they basically said there's nothing we can do. So she was on palliative care after that.
For how long? Just
for a year. So
it
was around Christmas of 2013 is when we found out. She was on chemotherapy, palliative chemotherapy, for about 9 months, 10 months, and she died the following year.
Yeah, and I should point out, there's a book, she wrote a book called, did she write the whole, wasn't ghostwritten, it was her?
No, that was, she wrote
called Late Fragments, Kate Gross,
yeah.
Which is available, I noticed. And this is written for your children,
yes,
specifically, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right, because she was so full of life, energy, and super smart. She was always trying to get a grip of the situation, control the situation. So one of the things that she did was she wrote a blog first, because I think what initially felt like a very lonely experience. It's like, this has happened to me, but then being able to see online other people are going through this, their stories, their journeys, I think helped her. So I think she wanted to do something similar. I was thinking about the boys as an Oscar as well. So for a way for them to kind of know, how she thinks, what she thought, and that then morphed into the book. So she would, boys would be off at school, I'd be at work, and she'd be like frantically typing during the day.
And I read that she actually saw the book once it was published, before she died.
Yes, that's right. So the book was just published before she died.
And then your mother-in-law added an addendum.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's right. And she got the right to an inscription for Isaac Oscar.
Yeah.
As well.
Yes.
So,
yes. Yeah.
So the boys had their copies of the book.
Yeah. So this was about 8 or 9 years ago. Is there anything that you could say that other people listen to that would help them in terms of learning? Is there anything during the process you learned that you wish you'd known? I'm sure there's lots, but anything specific you can think of?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that Kate tried to tackle in her book a little bit. It's kind of structured in a way where she's trying to teach the kids, but also other people about what she finds important in life. And I think she's trying to make the point that it's easy for us to get very busy and carried away with business and checking emails and stuff like that, but actually the things that matter in life are different. So I think there's kind of lessons for all of us in there, and I think one of the other things she strongly felt was, quite often when someone is diagnosed, other people don't know what to do. So it's just like, oh my God, what do I say to this person? And I think she was quite firmly of the view of, say something. It doesn't need to be perfect. You can't fix the situation with words, but you can just say, I'm here, and acknowledge it, talk to people as opposed to being afraid. And I think that was, talking about cancer, talking about digestive health problems was something that she felt that if we can do that more, it will make it a little bit easier for people that have cancer or people, in the families to talk about it, and more awareness of, cancer and GI problems, would hopefully get more people out to get checked by doctors sooner, rather than kind of saying, oh, it'll be fine.
That's to some extent what I'm doing here. I'm through the same process with my friends. I've done a podcast on circles of support and who to tell what to. And in my case, my kids were in their 30s, very different from your children in their, probably, the process, after she died, that must have been a terrible time.
Yes, yeah.
For the kids.
So the boys were not quite 6, so they were just over 5.5. So that was hard.
Yeah. So let's move on to how you're hoping that other people won't have the same issues at early detection. I was up at the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation, who of course know you, the other day, with Lise, and we had a look at the offices, and then we went to the labs where we met the academic that's working on the project, collecting the samples. So I know, and as you might be aware, early stage, just take about lung cancer at the moment, well, obviously you can detect other cancers. There is a screening program being introduced in the UK now for early detection, although it's aimed at people who the GPs have marked down as so many packs of cigarettes per year, so it clearly wouldn't ever have caught somebody like me. I'm in the minority. There are only 15% of us that have never smoked, but that's pretty intrusive, that, and you go through a process, questionnaire, low dosage CT. the thought of having a device that you've got in front of you where you just have to breathe into is just astonishing. So let's just talk through, initially you were detecting toxic gases. When did you, the word is pivot in our industry, when did you pivot into, and maybe span out a company or something? What happened that you ended up with something detecting gases in the breath?
Yeah, when we first spun the business out, the kind of technology and expertise we built was around detection of chemicals in the gas phase. And even way back then, we were thinking about what are the different applications. So there's security, industrial, and diagnostic applications was on the radar. It felt very far away because you needed to get the technology working first, then you need to run clinical trials, etc., etc. So that's part of the reason why we focused on security and industrial applications in the first instance. But one of the things that we found that was really interesting was we kept getting more and more academic groups come to us saying, I'm interested in trying to analyse chemicals on breath to detect different diseases or analyse chemicals in a urine or fecal sample. And actually, as they used our instruments and technology, they would run clinical studies, and they started to publish some findings right around the time Kate got sick after she died. And I think, at that point in time, I was, thinking, well, what do I want to focus on? I remember when Kate was first diagnosed, it all happened so fast. I knew nothing about cancer. I didn't know anything about early detection or anything like that. And I remember being so struck when I learned that if you pick it up sooner, there's 5 chances, or 90% or so. I was just like, this is. There was an easy thing that you could do, pick it up sooner. So it's easy to say, if you pick it up sooner, survival chance is so much better. It is incredibly difficult in practice to then create tests and get people to come to the test, make it economic, etc. So it's one of those easy to state, hard to solve problems. So for me, there was awareness of early detection probably could make one of the biggest impacts in cancer survival, combined with we were working on the technology at the time. But because it's a very different business, we decided to spin Alstone Medical out as a separate company in 2016. And we knew we needed to run clinical trials. They're really expensive, and we were really helped out actually. So we won a NHS SBRI contract, and that gave us enough resource initially to start to develop things like our breath sampler and start to get lung cancer trials initiated. So I think we've grown from there, and the basic premise of what we're trying to do is look at chemical markers on the breath to help detect cancer sooner.
Can I tell the techie side of the audience would like to know what the sensing is? Is it something on the surface of a sensing device, semiconductor, is it? Or,
so it's basically a bit like a spectrometer. So you introduce gas mixture, you then ionize gas, and you pass it through a silicon spectrometer and filters out. But I think one of we very naively thought, oh, this is going to be easy. We have this sensor technology that can detect gases. So we went and we looked at what chemicals have been reported in literature related to lung cancer detection. We thought, okay, we can take those and we can program those chemicals into our sensor. I think what we found was, it's not just about the analyzer. You need to get a good sample in the first instance. So what this device does is it allows you to get a good breath sample.
So you wear it for some time, do you?
Yeah, so you just breathe normally.
For how long? For minutes? Or?
So it's minutes. So because the nice thing about breath is just by breathing normally, you can capture more sample over time.
Rather than blowing, you mean? Though.
Yeah, so it's a way to get a more sensitive test because you can collect more chemical as opposed to a blood draw where you've got a finite amount of sample. So it's like, okay, well, you need more than sensors. You need to get the sampling right, and then on the sensor side, what we realized was that actually no one really knows what the biomarkers are that will...
Yet, or...
Yeah. So a lot
yeah.
of things have been reported, but they tend to be really quite small studies.
Right.
Small pilot studies that hadn't been followed up and validated in big, large prospective studies. So actually that meant that we had to invest very heavily in lab-based instruments, so mass spectrometers to help do discovery work. And then I think the next conclusion that we came to was, we know tumours have an altered metabolism, so trying to look for those small changes in chemicals was the original approach. So collect a sample, analyse it, try and look for those small changes. I think if you are looking at an early cancer detection test, it needs to satisfy a number of criteria. It needs to be sensitive in early stage disease, or pick up early stage disease. But it also needs to be specific, so minimize false positives. Because if you have people who are at risk or not at risk, and you create too many false positives, that's a big problem.
Stress and the cost.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a big problem. So I think the conclusion we came to is that actually just looking for the changes in these endogenous compounds probably wouldn't be specific enough. So we pioneered a technique called evoke probes, exogenous VOC probes. And the way to think of this is, it's a bit like in cancer imaging. So if you think of a PET scan, where you put a probe compound into the body, you have enhanced uptake within the tumour, and that's the basis of the imaging technique. We say, can you adapt that approach and introduce a probe compound that targets a unique characteristic of the tumour and then releases a signalling molecule on breath. So rather than have to put someone in the scanner,
So you're mixing this somehow with the breath before you put it through your analyzer, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the probe compound goes into the body. It's circulates around the body.
So it's injected in, is it? Or?
Yeah. So in the initial phase of the clinical trial, we inject it in, but ultimately, if that trial is successful, we hope to have it inhaled. So you inhale a probe and then you breathe out.
Sure.
And if this signaling molecule is present, the signal in the presence of the tumour. Because I think one of the problems with some of the blood tests is, it's a bit of a needle in the haystack problem. Part of the challenge in early stage cancer is often the needle is just not in the haystack. So we're trying to flip the problem, say, well, we're going to the tumour, we're bringing the probe to the tumour, and then releasing this reporter molecule out onto the brain.
I read, I've just been reading down the reception, you're looking at other cancers as well, though. These are again things that end up in the bloodstream, therefore end up in the breath, therefore can be detected, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of the volatile compounds, they come from an organ or a tumour out into the blood and then into the breath. So it's only the volatile compounds that you're looking at. So we do a lot of work in lung cancer ourselves. That's a really big area of focus for us. But we can also look at other diseases, and we tend to work with other academic and pharma partners, not just in other cancers, but other diseases, so respiratory disease, digestive disease, and the like.
Good, okay, so we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left maximum. How far are you on to the point, and maybe this is commercially secret, so say what you want to say, to the point where a GP surgery in the States, over here, Germany, or whatever, would be using it?
Yeah, so there's kind of 3 components to the business now. The first is research products and services. So this is where we can use technology such as this to try and find all the biomarkers in different diseases. So that's commercial today. A part of the reason why we have that business is because the early cancer problem is so hard and takes such a long time. From a commercial standpoint, you need to think about, well, how do you bridge that? How do you bring income into the business that helps fund that type of activity? And the second thing it allows us to do is there's no guarantee of success in a clinical trial. So you could run a clinical trial, it may not work. That's the reality of clinical trials. But what we believe is important is you have to try to solve the problem. You guarantee to fail if you don't try, basically. So I think that's an important part of our business. And then we have commercially available tests in digestive disease. So looking at patients that have these non-specific symptoms that impact their quality of life, doing a simple at-home breath test where they can send a sample to us. We analyse it, and that helps to tell.
They actually analyse it in this building here, rather than
that's right.
Device.
Yeah, exactly. So we analyse it in the building. So that's commercial today, and that's used by NHS, private pay patients as well. And then the lung cancer is still in the trial phase. So we've just successfully completed the safety study for the probe, so showing that the probe can be administered, there's not adverse.
Well, compared with anything that's injected, of course.
Yeah,
It's very relatively easy.
Yeah. So it's fundamentally still a trial stage.
Yeah.
I think our view is that is this a solvable problem? We think it is, and I think it comes down really to this approach of putting a probe compound into the body to target the tumour. I think the other approaches of get blood samples, etc., will struggle with early stage cancer for a very long time.
Mm.
So for us, I think our view is we can solve this problem, but it will take time, and there's risk at each stage of the clinical trials.
But a lot of this has been supported by investors, I suspect, as well.
Yes, that's right.
By contract.
Exactly, that's right. So we've been fortunate to get very supportive investors.
So your vision is to what? What's the grand vision here?
So to save 100,000 lives. So whenever you walk into the reception area, it's the first thing you see coming into the building. I think it's why we spun this business out.
Yeah.
And I think it's the reason why people come to work day in, day out to try and solve these enormously difficult problems, because we know early detection will save lives.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think for my lung cancer, I think if it had been detected at stage 1, which is unlikely, I'd have something like 55% chance of living 5 years. And as it is, I think it's 4.3%.
Yeah.
And I'm a year into this journey. I hope to be talking to you in 4 years' time, of course. I'm also hoping medical technology, come on, your technology is too late for me, but there are many, many other people around.
Yeah, and there's only 14.5% of people in the UK that get picked up at that early stage.
At the stage 1, 14% of all lung cancer
of all lung cancers are picked up at early stage.
So I'm not surprised, because, Good, okay, well that's been fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It's interesting that you're the first person I've interviewed where it's two parts of the story. They're so well connected, the fact that you've gone through that tragic time with Kate and then pivot or morphed your business into something that will help others is absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
So thank you very much to the audience, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.